In the last 3 federal elections, the Conservative Party won plenty of votes, but not enough to win. Political consultant and longtime Conservative activist Tasha Kheiriddin, who almost threw her hat into the ring for this year's leadership contest, maps out what she sees as a road to victory for her party in her new book. It's called The Right Path: How Conservatives Can Unite, Inspire, and Take Canada Forward. And Tasha Kheiriddin joins us now here in the studio. Great to see you again.
Great to see you too.
Let's do a little background here, because you posit the notion that the Conservative Party is kind of a big blue tent, mostly with 2 different kinds of conservatives, right? You've got club conservatives and convoy conservatives. Who are they?
They are the new subtype of conservative. We've long talked about fiscal, social, and other ones, but since the pandemic, and really since I think the convoy itself came to Ottawa earlier this year, you've seen a division, and played out within this leadership, of people who supported, if not the means, but the aims of the convoy, who felt that pandemic restrictions were too severe, who felt the government overstepped in terms of invoking the Emergencies Act and this kind of thing, and politicians, including many, and the leader, Candace Bergen of the Conservative Party, who stood with the supporters of the convoy, at least in the early period of it.
Had her picture taken with them.
It did indeed. Posed for photos, all that stuff. And then you have what I call the club conservatives, and I reference that because in a way, the convoy conservatives created them. It's, if you want to say, the elite of the Conservative Party, but not just elites. People who've been involved for a long time. People who may be a member of the Albany Club in Toronto, which is why I gave them the name Club Conservatives. The so-called establishment, mostly centered, I would say, in Eastern Canada, who have been long-time either Bill Davis conservatives or Red Tories or centre-right conservatives, but who did not share the perception the convoy conservatives did. And in fact, law and order is probably the biggest dividing issue between them, is how they saw the convoy and how it played out. So
we know they have a lot of things not in common. Do
Correct.
They have anything that unites them?
They do have things, and this is the thing that this leadership has, I think, failed to bring out as much, because it's really focused on divisions. But they have the commonality of fiscal conservatism. They have the commonality of believing in an alternative to the current government. They're united in saying, throw the bums out, but they are not united in the approach that is being taken, i.e., who are you appealing to? What is the basis of your positions, your rhetoric, the approach, the cast of it? Because the convoy conservatives are really populists. In a sense, they're not fully conservative at all. The aims and means of populism are actually what conservatism was created to fight, because conservatism was created against the French Revolution, as we know, back in 1789, which was a populist uprising. It was a more cautious approach to social change than populism represented. Populism is really, let's go fast, let's go hard. Conservatism is more look to the past, look to tradition, incrementalism. Like Stephen Harper actually was quite a conservative. He was very incrementalist.
Kind of conservatism without the guillotine.
Yes, conservatives truly do not love guillotines. Edmund Burke did not like the guillotine.
Gotcha. Which one are you?
I would say I'm the common sense Canadian who's kind of stuck in the middle. I've never been a member of the Albany. They've tried many times, and I love going there, but I wouldn't say I'm establishment. I think I'm center-right, definitely. I did not support the convoy. This is true. I didn't support it because I felt that if it had gone on for just the weekend, I think I probably would have understood. But subjugating the city of Ottawa and then border crossings to the kind of obstruction that was there, the way it devolved into a lack of law and order, which is something that a true conservative really upholds. That is just one of the pillars of conservatism, is you need order, not for order's sake, but so that everyone operates on the same playing field. Everyone knows what to expect. And people in Ottawa certainly didn't expect to have the horns honking, 24/7.
Okay, you say you're not a convoy conservative. You say you're not a club conservative. But you had your own radio show, you've had newspaper columns, you've written books. I mean, you've almost run for the leader. You're one of these people who the convoy conservatives look at and say, come on, she's a club conservative, aren't you?
You know what I actually realized in writing this book is that for all the demonization that's been happening for elites that we've heard of in the last year, it's unfortunate because it ignores the fact that in this country, one of the things we aspire to, it's the so-called Canadian dream, is to come from nothing and to reach a certain level, whether it's elite or, like you said, influential or other, by your merits, by your work, which is my story, quite frankly, the story of most, I would say, new Canadians. The aspirations for their children are that they can become a club conservative, right? It's not that they want them to be held back. So in demonizing people who have achieved something, and many of them, if not most of them, through their own work, it's actually contradictory to what conservatism is, which is the idea that, you know what, we want people to have a fair playing field, have equality of opportunity, work hard, and reap the fruits of those labors. So Am I a club? Some people might consider me a club conservative. I certainly wasn't born one.
Right. What influence do you think Donald Trump has had on the convoy conservatives in this country?
Well, I opened the opening introduction with that. It's when Trump came to Canada, and I say that tongue-in-cheek because he physically didn't, but he did have an influence, I think, in the political culture, what we consider acceptable forms of expression. By acceptable, I mean lines that we probably wouldn't have crossed before, swearing at the Prime Minister, lots of, F Trudeau bumper stick. That's become, I see them everywhere, right? A certain vulgarization of how we express ourselves. And I find that unfortunate. I understand people get really angry, and people have been really angry through the pandemic for a lot of valid reasons. But it's the way we feel we can let that out that he has brought to our culture. And also, I think the sense also that, again, this division between the elites, drain the swamp, this kind of language. Well, he is, if anyone's an elite in America, it would be Donald Trump. That's the irony. But he plays...
A billionaire New York property developer, you think?
I think.
Yeah.
And he plays, but this is the thing, he uses people's fears and the issues they've been with, the common people, as you would say, he uses them to get his vision across, and he plays on that. And I find that's what populists do, and that's why I'm not a populist, because I see populism not as the voice of the people. It's a voice of some people, but also the use of people and their problems to advance a political agenda, and I have trouble with that.
I don't want to spend too much time on the current leadership campaign that is
wrapping up.
Culminating on the 10th of September, absolutely. But, obviously a number of people have made the observation that Pierre Poilievre seems to be running the Donald Trump playbook in some respects. Certainly with the appeal to gatekeepers and populism and the elites who are trying to hold you down and all of that business. But in fairness, Mr. Poilievre has gained a lot of attention talking about freedom. Mm-hmm. And that is a message that has a lot of resonance in this country at the moment. You've said it really shouldn't be about freedom, Pierre. It should be about opportunity. What's the difference? Because
a poll just came out validating this, that 70% of Canadians think less of politicians who supported the convoy. And the convoy slogan was freedom. But the freedom that the convoy was advocating was not the traditional conception of freedom, either conservative or, I might add, small L liberal, which is, freedom to achieve your dreams, freedom to do what you wish, say what you wish. It was freedom, essentially, that was circumscribed by the pandemic, freedom to not get a vaccine, freedom to not wear a mask. Those freedoms were the freedoms that were taken away. Yes, in a way, that's true. But the point is that that is not what freedom is only about. And that is why a lot of people look on this and say, well, the freedom I see, the freedom I would champion is when, Gorbachev, when Ronald Reagan said, please, Mr. Gorbachev, tear down that wall, or when Brian Mulroney stood up and said, we need freedom in South Africa for, under apartheid, for black people who were oppressed to a point that we can't even imagine. People in the convoy, you lost freedoms, but it's a different level. And that is why I feel that by saying freedom, and also it's seen as a dog whistle, unfortunately, which really makes me sad, because as a conservative, it is a pillar of conservatism, is individual freedoms. But in the United States, it's also seen as a dog whistle to racism. It's become that. And as a result, when you use just the word freedom and you use that, it turns off a lot of people too. It turns off a lot of new Canadians. I spoke to hundreds of people in writing this book, and a message I heard from new Canadians over and over was, you know what? When I hear freedom, I hear a dog whistle. It's code. I don't believe it's talking about freedom, and it's not what I'm looking for. I want a better life for my kids. But that's what people in the convoy want too. This is the irony, is that you can get that sense of being blocked and frustrated, because really you could appeal to that and say, we're going to fix that through opportunity.
That's
right?
where the commonality is.
That's where the commonality, and that's what I'm saying. There's commonality. It's just not being expressed, and language is important because, if you use certain words, you will turn off a base of voters that otherwise you could get, in addition to those that are there, and you need that base to win. We're not going to win just with one small segment. We're not going to win with the base we have now. Well,
this raises the issue, and I remember hearing this expression when I was a kid all the time: can the center hold? And, as I look at politics, admittedly from the outside, not as an insider as you are, and I don't say that in a pejorative way, it's wonderful to be an insider. I'm looking for the center these days. I wonder where it is. I see a huge chunk of the Conservative Party that wants to be very much over on the populist, grievance-based right. I see a federal Liberal Party, which is acting more like the New Democrats acted when I was younger. And I ask myself, not can the center hold, but where is it? Does it even exist anymore? What's the answer?
Well, it does, and that's the common sense Canadians I talk about in the book. That's where I would put myself. It's the majority of people who look at the two extremes and say, I don't see myself in either. I'm looking for good government. I'm not looking for too much government, but I'm looking for good government. I'm looking for a fair playing field. I'm looking for lower taxes. I don't want to be over-governed. I'm not interested in that. But at the same time, I want to know that people who are there are not taking this in directions of either conspiracy theories or extreme woke politics, that they're interested in my well-being, right? And there's no other agenda in there that's being played just for votes, because that's what you end up feeling. And those people, I mean, there are groups, Center Ice Canadians is a group that I am involved in as well. Rick Peterson started that. Initially, it was basically conservatives who felt that they needed to have a voice of the center right within the policy process. It's not a party, it's a voice outside of it to influence other parties and influence governments. And that I think you're going to see more of, because people are feeling, like you're saying, that they're being left out of the conversation.
Now, I must confess, when you talked about opportunity in the book as being the sort of watchword for unifying conservatives, the first thing that popped into my head, and I think you actually touched on this in the book, was something Newt Gingrich 30 years ago called the Conservative Opportunity Society.
Yep.
And I remember thinking, okay, I know how that ended up. Well, and now Ted Cruz talks about it a lot today.
He does.
And I don't know why any conservative in Canada who was looking for a unifying, futuristic, future-looking thing would want to hitch their wagon to those two guys.
It's not hitching them to the two guys. It's hitching them to a concept that I think appeals to the three voter bases that we need. And the three voter bases that conservatives are missing right now is the urban conservative, urban suburban, the new Canadian conservative, and the young conservative. Now, arguably, freedom as a concept, and I found this in my research and conversations with the conservatives I spoke to, does resonate, particularly with younger people. Like, there's no question. And if you're a young person, freedom is something that generally, you're looking for in your life. You're free now to do what you want, and you don't want to be blocked in those aspirations. So freedom is appealing, and that's a watchword I think that Pierre Poilievre is gaining currency with. But when you look at the other groups, the suburban family doesn't care, I don't think, that Canada's the freest country on earth. We already have a sixth. By the way, we have a sixth freest country in the world. They care that they can't afford, now mortgage interest rates are rising. They can't afford maybe to live where they want. They can't afford to buy the groceries because of inflation that they were buying last year or last week. And Poilievre is hitting on those. This has been discussed in that context, but it's not you're free to buy groceries. You want the opportunity to buy groceries. And for that, you need economic policy that facilitates a job that will pay you enough too, because wages have not kept pace with the cost of living. This is the biggest issue.
How does the party, though, that a few elections ago, admittedly, but still in relatively recent memory, how does the party that ran on a barbaric cultural practices snitch line repave the road to immigrants and refugees and so on? Well,
that's why you can't hitch your wagon to something that is associated with racism in any way. And that is a big issue. That is probably because if that hadn't happened, I think there would be less of a sensitivity around this. But the party's own report that was done just before when I started writing the book, it was one of the pieces that I looked at. It came out in October, I think it was, or after October, November, I think it was, and it found that indeed the barbaric practices snitch line was still a factor in the October election. So there is that hangover. So the Conservatives
and that's
are already
7 years later.
Yes, they're already laboring under this conception that there's some kind of hidden agenda, anti-immigrant, anti-minority, racist, whatever you want to call it. And if you then tack onto that support for the convoy or what happened in Ottawa in particular, where there were flags, there were some racist elements, there were many that were not, but there were some, and they weren't called out sufficiently, in my view and other people's view. So you're associating yourself with that. And why would you do that? Because it's not going to help you with that cohort.
In our last few minutes here, you've been helpful to Jean Charest on his campaign for the leadership of the Conservative Party. Are you concerned? And look, the book's a good read, and you've laid a path forward, and it's a completely defensible argument, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Are you outnumbered in today's Conservative Party, and therefore there's not very many people, or not enough people who want to hear this message?
I think there's a lot of people. I've been going across the country with the book, and it's been really well received. People have said, my inbox has been filling up with people saying, I read your book, and thank you for saying what I've been thinking. Thank you for saying this. Thank you for laying this out. I've also been, I'll say it, the subject of a lot of attacks in this campaign by certain other camps and over my book. And I'm just thinking, wow, I guess it makes you nervous because you realize that maybe I'm saying something that's valid here, that's resonating with people, and you should listen to it. Because you know what? Whoever becomes leader has to understand, how are we going to win the next election? You've got to be able to keep the family together and grow the family. You cannot otherwise. So, you know, I'll take the attacks. I really don't care. I sort of have the badge of honor in a way that, the power of the pen is real, I think.
But if it is Pierre Poilievre who ends up winning this thing, can you imagine him adopting any of the strategies you've put forward?
He's been using the word opportunity a fair bit lately. I've heard that in a few of his videos.
You're taking credit for that?
I'm not going to take credit. You know what? His campaign has run the campaign they believe will win him the leadership. I personally don't believe that's the way to win the country. I think that you can win the country if you give the message that those missing voter bases, and also present conservatism as it really is, because people have an impression of conservatism that is false. It is not only about the individual. It is not only about, championing. It's also about community. It is about the small platoons of society, supporting the family as, an antithesis to the state. There's so much good stuff there that you can mine to say, like, this relates to the average person. Local government, local decision-making. You want power, you want to have control over your life. Yes, you want it close, you want government close to the people. That's a hugely conservative concept, and no one's talking about that.
Well, we are here, and we thank you for coming in to talk to us about it. That's Tasha Kheiriddin, author of The Right Path. Good to have you here, Tasha.
Thanks so much, Steve.
The Agenda with Steve Paikin is made possible through generous philanthropic contributions from viewers like you. Thank you for supporting TVO's journalism.